So probably the reason that I got this job is because of the IIJA and the investment in infrastructure and what Amtrak is doing to build and grow, to set the foundation for what we have, kind of reinvesting in what our assets that we currently own, as well as to grow and expand the service. And so the 66 billion is the magic number, the one that we've been all focused on collectively. The 22 billion of that's been allocated for Amtrak's use, for us to improve and upgrade our assets. And then the remaining 44 billion is what we're all working on. And lots of folks have talked about today, and I'll talk about some more in terms of the FRA's discretionary grants and how that's being allocated. So for us, this represents what's an amazing, once in my career, opportunity to modernize our assets. And that comes in three buckets, if you will, looking at our stations. Big, beautiful Chicago Union Station, all the way to the lovingly described Amshacks, making improvements there. But also modernizing our fleet. I'll talk a little bit about that, as well as our infrastructure, the assets that we own, and we partner with others on to help improve. So this is just a little bit of a kind of a year-end fiscal year 23 report card for us. And Larry will talk about when he picks up the presentation about getting our equipment back in service. That has been, it's been a big challenge of my job the past 11 plus months, has been making sure we have enough equipment. The demand is there. People want to ride the trains, yet in some cases we don't have the equipment to be able to provide that service. Station ADA work is another big one, like a couple slides on that. But this has been a huge goal in meeting for 2029 to be able, it says 2028 here, we anticipate being done by the deadline of 2029 to get all of our stations up to ADA standards. And then the refresh and renew, again, Larry, this is in Larry's shop looking at the long distance fleet, but also we're getting new fleet online. The Acellas, we do have some not in service yet. They're on Amtrak's property, but we're doing the modeling and testing with Alstom right now that is in progress, as well as with the Aero train sets and the state venture cars entering service in the next couple of years coming on board. So we are working in terms of the long distance fleet procurement, which Larry will talk to, but fleet is huge. And one of the things that I've been focusing on in my job is kind of scrounging, if you will, a professional term of where can we better utilize the fleet that we have, bring things that are mothballed, bring things that need wreck repairs, and making sure that this equipment is available to provide service. Looking for ways that we can do maybe shorter turns on the platforms, or things to just kind of keep our equipment in service and moving, and being able to provide more service. And then looking at the major infrastructure projects, you're probably, maybe a show of hands, how many folks have heard of Amtrak's Capital Delivery Department? Capital Delivery, yeah, it's a new group stood up within Amtrak to serve as our construction arm, to be able to actually build and deliver on major projects. Many of them in the Northeast Corridor on the Amtrak-owned assets, but station redevelopment projects in Baltimore and Philadelphia, where I'm from, Frederick Douglass Tunnel, Portal North, a lot of these old assets, and bringing them to a state of good repair, pretty well overdue as well. There was some talk this morning here about the OTP enforcements, and I guess working with the STV, the complaint that was submitted back in 2022. So hopefully, that's being investigated, and maybe with a friend Peter Schwartz at STB that we can help accelerate that. And then hiring, it has been a whirlwind of hiring at Amtrak, both agreement staff, people that are doing the physical work and out on the rails, as well as the management folks like myself. And another 4,500 more in this current fiscal year, which we just started. So this shows by service line where we are in terms of our ridership. Looking from yellow being the long distance at the bottom, then the next bar is the blue, the state-supported services, and then the red is at the top for the NEC. And you can see by fiscal year, kind of from 2015 to 2019, kind of creeping along. And then the pandemic, COVID-19, and you can see now we're rebounding. 2023, as I mentioned, we're pretty much close to where we are, as in FY19. And it's interesting what I've noticed, and just reading the type of travelers. As you may suspect, business travel is kind of down, and leisure travel is up, and people are discovering rail as really an efficient, easy, convenient way to do your travel. And I also learned of the term bleisure, business and leisure combined. You might have a meeting in a town on a Friday, and you're like, well, I'm just going to spend the weekend there and then take the train back. So this bleisure travel is something that we've been able to benefit from. So a little bit about me. So yes, as Jim said, I am a civil engineer, or at least my degree is in engineering, but I've been working as a consultant for Amtrak probably for 25 years before joining Amtrak. And I figured if I didn't do this in my career now, I would never join an agency or a railroad. I've always been in consulting, working for Amtrak's engineering department, doing work on 30th Street Station District Plan, various station projects, feasibility studies, corridor studies. So I took over this opportunity. Paul Vilter was my predecessor, and so he retired, and I took over. I was able to get this job, and just a little bit about my group and the types of folks that I work with at Amtrak. So you can say 4 to 5 different buckets. So project planning is the first one, and that's what I grew up doing, say, in my career. And that's, if there's going to be a new corridor or a new station, or we want to improve something on Amtrak's network, how do we do it? And so I work with Nicole Busich, which some folks here know, in network development. We piggyback back and forth in terms of, my team supports her, she supports us. We collaborate a lot. While she goes and figures out where these corridors are going to be, we support her in that. And do the same thing on the Northeast Corridor, too, when it comes to project planning. Like, we have ideas of things, something that should be improved, like we want to improve speeds and trip times on the Northeast Corridor. Well, my team comes up with, where are those areas where we can smooth out a curve or improve the signal system or do something to facilitate faster trains. So then corporate strategy is another group that's under me. We will be releasing soon our strategic blueprint for the next 5 fiscal years. And it's basically our North Star, our roadmap, and our internal guidebook of how we're going to advance as an organization, as a railroad, as an entity. And it has metrics, things that we're going to be measured against. So it's it's not it's not going to be sat on a shelf. It's going to be something that we're going to be working with on a daily basis. Another group that's under me is commercial services. This one was the one I had the least familiarity with, but I am familiar with now. And so this represents, we do train and engine work, mechanical services for several commuter rail agencies around the country, as well as the private cars, the business car, private business car owners, and we liaise with them and sign the contracts with them, as well as charter services that we do for sports teams and others that want to charter a train, typically on the NEC, but off corridor as well, typically and preferred where Amtrak already has service. And finally is the sustainability report. I liked the shout out earlier to there we go, thank you for the sustainability team. They did an amazing job with putting together that report, and very passionate folks that work on this to make sure that what we're doing is sustainable. One big thing that we've been focusing on too is just resilience in our assets. And as we're renewing a station, a facility, a signal hut, understanding where those vulnerable assets are. Like we look at, I think my sense is that New Orleans is could be a hub for more service in the future, right? So understanding, okay, well, I think that might be one of the highest areas in the region, fortunately, but what are those assets that are vulnerable to flooding in storms as climate change and other events happen, and being aware of when we're making improvements that we're going to make sure that they're hardened or resilient and hopefully resistant to those climatic effects. So those are kind of the 4 groups that are under me. And then one of the things that I've encouraged the planning team to do, my team, and throughout Amtrak really, is to build relationships, because planning in my group, lots of people have ideas, and we, in some sense, serve as the synthesizer, or the team that, vets and prioritizes and ties it in with other initiatives, so we're not looking at something in isolation and moving forward with this big capital project, but yet there's this other thing we should be doing that would really enhance the benefit of the project in total. So the groups I liaise with Larry a lot in the service lines, the capital delivery group, mechanical and transportation and marketing, and my friend Mariah here in government affairs, and lots of organization representation around the U.S. and internationally too, with UIC, the International Union of Railways. So in terms of big goals, big picture stuff, we've publicly said we're going to be doubling our ridership. So from roughly 32 million to 64 million, and then achieving net zero by 2045. And so the three items along the bottom here are things that our sustainability team, as well as others in Amtrak, but the sustainability team is leading, looking to have carbon-free electricity by 2030, being at the forefront of technology when it comes to zero emissions equipment, and understanding what the manufacturers, and kind of pushing the industry towards zero emission equipment, hydrogen, battery, and other, electrification where it makes sense. And then, as I mentioned, a company-wide resilience program, understanding where those vulnerable assets are and making sure we're hardening them for the future. So stations is big. I've done a lot of stations work over my career, and I see it on the other side here at Amtrak, but the ADA group is moving ahead in leaps and bounds in terms of investing in the ADA stations program. And in talking, Todd Stennis, I don't think he's here right now, but in prior conversations with him, he really impressed upon me how important stations are to the community. And I think with our mayor's panel this morning, the stations are key. And even to me, sometimes the ADA improvements may not seem that glamorous, but my goodness, they're essential, critical, and beneficial to a community. So we, our stats say that 104 stations with another 16, I think we did meet that by just the end of this fiscal year here. And so 2029 is our goal. And so in addition to the ADA program, there's also station modernization efforts. And those are focused mainly in the Northeast corridor with New York, Philadelphia, DC, Baltimore, but also Chicago. And then just shows a map of all of the stations that are slated in the program for ADA improvements by 2029. And you can see it's, everywhere throughout our network. And we have a substantial team of folks that are working on it, contractors, Amtrak employees, to advance, the design of these and getting them into implementation. So you're probably familiar with this map, the Connects Us map, right? This was like, when this came out, I wasn't at Amtrak yet. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so great. Very exciting. We're going to have all these new routes, but not only new routes, but routes with more frequencies or extending routes, getting more passengers, serving all of our major metro areas. And you'll talk to Nicole, and what she'll say is, you know what? We, Amtrak, we're not in the driver's seat anymore. It's these folks, the folks that have applied for Corridor ID, for the Fed-State Partnership, for the CRISI grants. We as Amtrak are here to support you in those programs, that process. So, there are some that we are leading as Amtrak, but just a little bit of detail from Corridor ID, and this we've been watching, and we're forging those partnerships where we can with the applicants. But noting that over 95 applications were submitted, and just they fall into three buckets. For existing corridors, improvements to those, extensions or reroutes of existing corridors, and then the bulk of them would be new corridors. So again, it's our role to partner with the folks that have submitted those, if we're not the the sponsor of them and be there as in a support role as needed. So in terms of Chrissy, I know that we talked about, I think Administrator Bose spoke about it this morning in terms of what's been announced. Some of these are the Amtrak-led ones, which we're thrilled about all of them, but thrilled about the ones that are Amtrak-led, including some in this region, as well as ones that Amtrak supported. So yeah, Administrator Bose went through these this morning, but we're very excited to continue moving forward. We have been doing pre-work where we can, but now we can really hit the ground running. And then this just gives an example of some of the projects that we have been leading when you're looking at kind of the middle swath of the country. For Corridor ID, looking at Cardinal Daily service, as well as Daily Sunset Limited service. I think this probably most people are aware of that here. And then also some joint applications that we've been that we've put in for selection. We will hear about that before the end of the year. Hopefully, like a nice Thanksgiving present is what I'm personally hoping for. So Indiana DOT with the Cardinal improvements, I-20, which has been talked about a lot here, and then the Sunset Limited. So we will hear more in our next session from you, Frank, about the long distance study. And I know Larry and his team have had a role in that. We will have a larger role as it moves forward. I think it's going to be critical for Amtrak to be a voice at the table for this. The worst thing that can come out of it is, well, better, I don't know, would you say it's good or bad, that comes out and says there's going to be 15 new long distance corridors, and then but no money to be able to advance them. So we do want to be at the table. We look forward to being a part of that process, and yeah, it's great. We're following it closely, and it is playing into what we have right now as a long distance fleet procurement. It's publicly out that we anticipate releasing the request for proposals before the end of the year, or at the end of the year, for that fleet equipment purchase. So then it comes down to money, and so we continually ask. I think a lot of the things that were discussed here today, is what's holding us back is the financial ability to be able to advance. I mean, it takes people, it takes trained people, it takes time, but it also takes money. And so as FY24 gets nailed down from a federal standpoint, just to know that there's different proposals from the Senate and the House. And so, we have aspirational asks, we have real asks, and we ask you to continue to be there in a support function, advocating for us and the funding that's needed to advance our program. And so just, what happens if there's not enough funding? So a lot of these people that were just hired, could be affected in terms of our jobs, in terms of the service, in terms of, all that we've built up in recent years gets winnowed away. And then, capital projects in the economy. So, capital projects in terms of not being able to do things as quickly as we would like in terms of our equipment and our infrastructure. And then those ancillary benefits. I know having the conversations about the economic benefits that go beyond, just the immediate station building, but transfer out into the community around. So just real quick here, in terms of our near-term expansions, this just lists a time frame of some of the services that have been recently expanded in the past couple of years and what's coming in the very near future. Looking ahead, the 5th and 6th Cascade trains in the Northwest in 2023, like before the end of the year. And the TCMC 2024 in New Orleans Mobile we've talked about as well in 2024. And then I'll just, before closing and handing over to Larry, just talk about high-speed rail. And so you may be aware, I am so privileged I get to work with him, but our celebrity hire, our transportation celebrity hire, Andy Byford, it's Train Daddy, yes. Oh my goodness, like what a joy to be able to work with him and learn from him. But he's helping pull together our strategy. Stephen Gardner, our CEO, said, we're gonna figure out high-speed rail. Let's see what makes sense for Amtrak. So he hires Andy and says, go figure it out. So that's what he's doing. But just to show here some of the improvements in terms of high-speed rail. The first one, Chicago-St. Louis, getting to 110, and it is so cool riding the Lincoln service, and the highway parallels it, and you're like on the train, and the cars are doing their thing a little bit more slowly. But then a lot on the Northeast corridor in terms of speed improvements there. Different alignments, the curve, smoothing out curves and such. So high-speed rail, just showing that it's not all that Amtrak is. I don't want that to be all that Amtrak is and does, and I know our CEO is the same, and all of us. It's just one piece of the puzzle. So understanding what it means with conventional intercity passenger rail service, what those connections are with transit, and very, very near and dear to my heart is the first mile, last mile, and bike ped, and making sure that access and ease to the station it's not like you have to be dropped off or drive to the station to get around. So yeah, this is preaching to the choir here, that we're excited to work with you, and yeah, we're looking forward to the announcements. I can't wait to hear more. And we will be part of the process when more applications are submitted in the next rounds. So from here, I'll turn it over to Larry.
Can you hear me
Yes.
now? All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Anna Lynn. And I just want to thank the RPA and Jim and the whole team here for inviting us to participate in today's meeting. This has been an outstanding meeting and a great gathering. Appreciate all of the passion in the room for not only what we're doing today at Amtrak, but and also for what is coming in the future, and so much investment in that in that vision and commitment to that. That's so important. So thank you all for all of that. I'm going to just talk a little bit more about some of the things Anna Lynn mentioned, but focusing specifically on the long distance network in particular. And well, who am I? I am the vice president of the long distance service line at Amtrak. As Jim said, I wear a couple other hats supporting our service planning, which is our schedule building, and our demand forecasting, other things. A lot of things I work closely with Anna Lynn's team on. If you can go to the next slide, please. I just want to start with a few, oh, yeah, of course I do. Can we go to the next slide, please? Woo! All right, everybody. Should have done some jumping jacks before I got clear the head. Okay, first of all, just want to focus on ridership. You know, just focusing on the last 5 years, and as Anna Lynn said, we are, as Amtrak overall, we are very close to the FY19 level. For the long distance network, in terms of ridership, our final FY23 number, with a little bit of an asterisk because we don't have the exact final data, probably in the next day or two, but right around 3.9 million riders, which is 85 to 90% of our all-time high, and that's with all of the challenges that we've faced with some equipment availability. And I don't have to tell anyone here about what that valley was all about and the challenges of the pandemic. But you know, for the long distance network and for Amtrak as a whole, that was you know, a life and death kind of experience of just making sure that we as a business could survive, that our employees and our customers remained healthy through what was a crazy thing. And we reduced our service quite a lot. We committed to bringing our service back, and this corresponds to that. If you can go to the next slide, Larry. This is just the same view, but on a revenue basis. And in this case, In FY22, we actually produced more revenue on the long distance network than we did in FY19. And that final figure for this past fiscal year will be in the range of $575 million. So the highest we've ever produced, and a function of strong interest in the long distance service and our ability to serve a lot of customer needs across the country. So we'll talk a little more about fleet. I know you're all very interested to know, how are we mobilizing the equipment that Amtrak has, and we made decisions during that pandemic in order to survive, in order to get through, and to reduce service and minimize costs, that we idled some of our equipment. Over 160 rail cars were idled in total. And we've been bringing those back, but there's been a lot of work to not only get the resources in place in our mechanical organization, but also just to be able to do, when you set aside work, you still have to do the existing work for the fleet that remains active. And so getting that schedule built to reincorporate the equipment that has been idled has been a challenge, but it started in earnest in this past fiscal year in FY23. And this, with regard to the long distance portion of that in particular, and I'll share some information about some other fleets as well, but we have 63 cars that will be returned to service by the end of this fiscal year. And that's going to make a meaningful difference. That will increase our availability by in the range of 10% or more, and some of those trains that on the margin have not had as many cars as they'd like to have, and as demand warrants, will have more capability to add capacity. And it's not only about coaches and sleeping cars, but also about some of the food and service cars that we have been limited as well. So this chart just goes in a little more detail on that, and you can see, a good portion of this has already happened in fiscal year 23, and we're now just at the start of fiscal year 24. But I'll just explain at the very top of this so the long distance related cars, the 63 at the top, are broken into these two categories. What we call overhaul backlog are the cars that were idled during the pandemic. So they were set aside. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Those were Anna Lynn used the term mothballed. Well, we set equipment aside with the uncertainty through the pandemic of when exactly we would need to use that equipment again, but knowing that we had to take, some actions. And so that's the majority. That's about 2/3 of this restoration. Some of the superliners have already come back in the Viewliner 2 category. That includes, I think, 5 of that 11 figure is dining cars. And so we did idle dining cars, and that has limited our ability to deploy more broadly. So that does give us greater flexibility that we expect to have as early as this coming summer, in summer of FY24. And so decisions about where that will be deployed and how are still ahead of us and subject to a couple of remaining moving parts. But the inelegantly named category of wreck, I wish we'd call that maybe something like, damaged equipment. But this is a repairable equipment that is slated to be restored to service. And it could be cars that have been idled for a significant period of time. And this isn't everything. We still, unfortunately, one of our biggest challenges is that we've had a series of derailment events that not only have unfortunately caused some loss of life, but have certainly damaged our fleet of equipment. And not only is it the damage, but it is the complexity of the NTSB investigation process and legal proceedings. And often we don't have access to that equipment to remobilize it or to repair it if it is indeed repairable for significant amounts of time, can be more years in some cases. And so, we've had 3 meaningful events in the last 3 years, and that has impacted us. Nonetheless, this is encouraging news about redeploying and reactivating a significant amount of equipment. At the bottom of the chart are 2 other fleets that are not used typically in the long distance world, but are also part of this overhaul backlog. And you can see in fiscal 24 a significant number of our Horizon coach cars that have historically been used in state-supported service that were idled will also be coming back into the active fleet. So more than 90, there's even some more that have happened. There are some that will trickle into FY25, but this is really the addressing the bulk of the equipment unavailability or restoration into the fleet. So the second R, restoration. The second R is refresh. And we've talked about this. I just wanted to give an update on the status of the Superliner refresh, which is a major investment. And we now have some of each of the car types completed. And, each one has its own complexity in terms of the design and the development of the materials for new cushions and seat covers, carpets, curtains, and heavy cleaning. We are about 80% complete with the coaches in the Superliner fleet, and those are expected to be done as early as the upcoming January. So that'll be a nice milestone. If you've been on Superliners anytime recently, you've probably had a chance to see the refreshed interior, and they really do look great. And people like them a lot, and that's all good. Sleeping cars are finally sort of hitting stride in terms of the work effort and a good cadence underway. It's going to take till the end of the program, which is still about a year and a half away before they'll be completed. Similarly, diners and lounges will be finished sooner. They're not as far along, but on a steeper path in terms of the development. So really feeling good that this overall program will be completed. It takes an awful long time. Everything seems to take long. That's been a theme today in many ways, but really happy to report that this program is well on its way and is meeting its plan and its timeline now, which is an improvement. We do have plans to begin the Viewliner 1s, the car that I was in on my trip down here with many of you in the room. We were on the Cardinal coming out of the Northeast. I'm sorry, the Cardinal. I meant to say the Crescent. And 2 of those Viewliner 1 cars were serving on that route, and so they will go through a similar type of refresh, and in fact, ideally, even a little bit broader scope of that content of that work, but that's still being finalized. And the last thing in this realm is that we have been some of you have seen what was the first of the projects to redesign and make a much improved ADA accessible bathroom on the lower level of our Superliner 1 coaches. We expect to do 23 of those in total. It's a much improved, really looks great, and unfortunately takes longer than you'd like it to, but we're well underway, and that project continues. Finally, the fleet replacement, which of course is a major beneficiary of the IIJA funding of that $22 billion of support for the future of Amtrak. That's not only lots of infrastructure projects, but both our aero fleet and our long distance fleet and related investments are intended to be covered by that. And so this is a great opportunity for us. We're well in the process of preparing for what will be at the end of this year an RFP to the car builder market. And so a lot of work is underway on developing our specifications for both the single level and bi-level long distance fleet types. We appreciate the support that the RPA has provided for not only helping explain sort of where we're at in the initial design, but also specifically on the question of equivalent facilitation, which has to do with the provisions for accessibility for the new fleet going forward, and how do we not only comply with law, but also perhaps provide what we think is a better solution that but would need to be approved in order to be allowed to, and to be confirmed by the officials as equivalent or better than what is required. We believe that we can do that. We're very committed to the long distance fleet of the future, improving accessibility, not only for customers with mobility disabilities, but for all of our customers who I think will benefit from some of the improvements in the environment on board our trains. And so Lynn also mentioned our capital delivery team, which is a new part of our organization in the last 2 years. They're responsible not only for this huge amount of infrastructure investment, but also for leading these fleet programs of fleet acquisitions as well. And so it's great to have teams and experts to work with us on that. And so this is a monumental kind of thing about the future of the long distance. And in the context, as we'll hear from Frank in a bit about network expansion, the fleet that we are acquiring is expected to be a replacement of our capabilities for our existing network. And though we'll have the ability to have significant options to grow the fleet and be able to support whatever may come next. And that's we don't have that capability today to really do any kind of network expansion without the benefit of new fleet. And so that's why this project is so critical, not only to allow us to continue the next generation of the current long distance network, but to also create the opportunity to grow. We've talked about this. I think this is exciting, especially here in Meridian. But Lynn spoke on this. But we are working closely with others and are very interested in this opportunity. And it's one of the great ideas, I think, out there about the future of the network. I won't go into great detail on this, but I just wanted to share that we have recently released our new customer commitments. We got good feedback from the leadership of this organization as we went back and developing these commitments. You can find this on our website. The next step for us is really about how do we make sure customers know that we're committing this, and when putting it in front of them as well. But this is just, and there's really nothing revolutionary here. I think you'd look at these and say, well, I kind of expect that. And I think they're reasonable expectations. We just want to make sure that we're clear and that it's a guiding, that these principles guide how we continue to improve our ability to deliver at Amtrak. Traditional dining is something people are interested in. Am I right? Am I right? So, the short history is that, of course, our dining services were severely curtailed during the pandemic. And when we relaunched our daily service on the network in the summer of 2021, we also used that opportunity to relaunch in a sort of reimagined version of our traditional dining and our Western routes. And working on executing that effectively, making sure it was that it would be well received and well delivered, and that did go well. And we initially did not have a mechanism for allowing coach customers to have access to that product on those Western routes. We've now it's no longer a pilot program; it's now an ongoing program where we are inviting coach customers at each meal period to have the opportunity to partake in that. And that's been, as you can imagine, well received and is going, I think, quite well. We've just, this past summer, formally launched the traditional dining on the Silver Star and the Silver Meteor. And again, different equipment type, different mechanism for delivering that service. Some of you may recall that the Silver Star just a few years ago was a route that did not even have dining service. It had cafe service only, and the two Florida routes were differentiated in their product. That change was made pre-pandemic to reintroduce dining, and now both of the services with the upgraded traditional dining, we have not yet made the parallel action of allowing coach access to this, and that's only a function of just making sure we get it right, and we that the service is stable and that we're serving the sleeper car customers effectively. But we expect to be able to do that in not too distant future. We've upgraded cafe service and talk more about that. I think there's more opportunities for us to keep making improvements. I really want to commend Ned for their great presentation today and the great engagement in this process that I think is really helpful. And I believe the Amtrak organization is also maturing in a way that we can be an effective partner and can really make commitments to continuous improvement in all aspects of our customer onboard experience related to food and beverage. The one thing I'll say one other thing about this with regard to the long distance network, some of what we face for the remaining routes that have today the flexible dining service and do not have the traditional dining. Some of it is that are the limitations of our fleet, some of which, as I mentioned, we're working on improving, but we will be constrained, and we have to still, I think, develop a plan for each of the 6 remaining routes to say what was the equipment that will be available starting in now and going forward, and there are some changes that are likely, but we won't have dining cars on all of our routes, but that doesn't mean that we can't do things to improve the quality of the dining experience and the food service that we offer. And so we're hearing you, and you guys are good advocates for making improvements. I think the Food and Beverage Working Group and the response to that will be coming in the next month or so will be a thoughtful response, and we'll begin to lay out a game plan for how do we address next steps. And appreciate your support, your understanding, and your patience as we move forward. Just wanted to say something quickly about long-distance pricing. This is focusing on our coach average fares. This goes all the way back to 2013, if you can't see the figures, the number in 2013 was $77. That's our average network coach fare. That number actually declined slightly over the following years. And has since FY20 has been climbing a little bit. Our end of year FY23 number is expected to be just about back where it started in FY13. And the point of this is really that coach fares have been remarkably stable. This is the essential service that Amtrak, that the long distance network provides. Many of you have noted that pricing on the first class portion of the products that we offer has increased significantly. I think that's a function of not only that we've had some reduced supply, but we've had really an increase in demand, and that's a growing interest in the product. It was the most resilient part of our product lineup through the pandemic, even though demand dropped significantly, but there was, private rooms were obviously attractive in that environment. And I think we continue to have new customers experiencing those products and interested in them. And so but the essential service that we provide to customers, the coach customers in our network, we're committed to keeping that affordable, keeping that stable. And in fact, as our capabilities and around pricing and revenue management are getting more capable and more robust, it allows us to broaden the range of prices that we offer. And that means that on the highest demand trains at the peak days of week and times and segments of routes, that could mean the prices actually are higher than they should be, but that's supply and demand. The inverse is that we can generate more demand by offering lower prices and by making our service even more attractive, and moving both directions on the pricing scale and broadening the number of price points that are available, and being more thoughtful about anticipating customer demand allows us to serve the needs of more people. And that's going to allow us to grow ridership, and we're excited about that. Last thing I'll mention, we talked some about this already, so I don't think anything too surprising here, but the STB work in terms of establishing the standards and establishing the certified routes with each of our host carriers to confirm that the routes as they're built are operable at high reliability. And now the commitment is, well, let's see it happen. We're not quite there. We're a long ways away, in fact. None of our routes are meeting the 80% threshold yet. There's some that are making some good progress, and there's some good news. But overall, our on-time performance remains in the low 50s across our long-distance network. We spoke about the Sunset Limited action that's been brought and is being pursued currently. The city of New Orleans is one route that has improved significantly and is getting close to that threshold. And I'm hopeful that we can at least get one, if not two or three routes over that threshold. But it's the performance of our and the behavior of our host partners is, as you all know, critical to this. And it's encouraging to see some signs of improvement and relationships improving, and we appreciate all the work that folks in this room have been doing about that as well. Last thing I'll say is about the Crescent, that one that I misspoke earlier. We made a pretty unique agreement to change our host railroad relationship with the NS a year or two ago, and actually added more time to the route, which was unfortunate, but we also got a much firmer commitment from them and much more rigorous agreement that has more teeth in terms of penalties for falling short of performance. But really, trying to build a win-win structure that we can then leverage. And it's not quite where we hoped it would be, but it's getting significantly better. One of the main things that allows us to do on the Crescent you may know that on the northbound number 20, by the time that train gets to Washington, historically, its reliability was poor enough that we weren't confident that we could sell to customers service from Washington north on the Crescent as it continued to New York. And so the train went on, and people passing through, of course, were on board, but we didn't board new customers in Washington or in Baltimore or along the way because the train wasn't reliable enough. We've gotten to the point where arrival in Washington is reliable enough that we're opening that train to service. It's at a pretty good time in the middle of the afternoon. And that's a great example of the benefit of reliability, that we can carry more customers, we can serve the needs of more people by running the network with greater reliability. So I think that's all, and Anna Lynn might join me, and we'll be happy to take questions if there's any time left. Jim?
Thanks, Larry, and thanks, Anna Lynn. We are actually over time, but I know there's a sort of pent-up demand to ask several questions, so let's flex and give people a little bit more time to ask questions. But we do want to try to recover the schedule here. We know about that. Yeah. Okay, and they're going to hang around, so you can ask your questions separately as well. I know we have one online, so let's start with that.
And remember, folks, if you guys want to ask questions, so we're not all over the place, get in line so we can kind of like, a little bit order. Quick question. Actually, I just lost it. Damn it. All right. So you talked about the service, getting the fleet back in order, the next couple of years. This is a question about the axle count, the shunting in Illinois. I guess there was a recent article that to talk about the situation, and there could be a longer-term solution being tested on the locomotives to migrate this issue. Do you know of, from Amtrak's perspective, has there any progress been done on this to actually get those superliners because it's not just you have cars that actually are in service that aren't being used just because of this single issue. Is there any chance of actually getting those cars back in service as well?
Thank you, Joe. Yeah, that's it's one of those things that's been out. This has been an issue for so many years, and it does cost us access to equipment for the long distance network because of and some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the details of this issue. I won't go deeply into it, but we have a number of routes where we have to operate a certain size of equipment and certain number of cars in order to meet shunt requirements. To assure that signals are triggered on some of our routes, and we've been pursuing solutions for a very long time, and there is actually very encouraging news. And I'm a little reluctant to jinx it, and so knock on something. But there's a new technology that's been tested. It seems to be passing its tests. And there's the question now is just a deployment schedule and how long that will take. But there is testing, significant activity going on under this, and we're excited about it.
Okay, Chris, you're up.
All right. Well, thank you for your presentation. It was very informative, and I appreciate the transparency. However, I do have a question. What was Amtrak's thinking on idling the lounge cars and the dining cars, especially for the Viewliner 2 fleet that was very new? Was it an issue of crewing the cars, or was it for staffing? I just don't understand the thinking. I understand the coaches that had to be a priority, and I understand sleepers. But when you're selling a long-distance train product, why would 5 of the 11 Viewliners 2s have diners or lounges be idled, and then on your superliners, only 20%? It seems like it's the lowest priority to restore the fleet for the superliners, and I'm just wondering what Amtrak's thinking is on that.
Okay, and just in recognition of the time, we're not going to do follow-ups.
Thank you. So I appreciate that, and I can speak to, I think, most of those questions. I mean, there were a lot of decisions taken in the heat of the battle in the pandemic where, massive uncertainty about when service would be restored. We were clearly cutting back to a very limited onboard services through the pandemic, and we also had fewer resources available in terms of employees to do work, and we cut back our maintenance program. And so the combination of those things led to, where could we take decisions that would allow us in the short term to survive, to save money, but still allow us to provide our minimum threshold of services. So with perfect hindsight or perfect foresight, if we knew how long things were going to take, we might have made different decisions, but you can only make a decision once, and we did. Yeah.
And again, just because of the time, I'm sorry, I'm just not going to be able to get to everybody, but they will be here, and you can ask them their questions.
I enjoyed both of your presentations. Wonderful. This is not exactly a long distance question, but it's an equipment question. I am very eager to ride overnight sleeper from Boston to Washington. I have taken that many times. It came back very briefly after COVID and then disappeared again. But many times I'm in New England and I want to take the Cardinal. And that's the best way for me to do it. So I am just anxious for that to come back.
Yeah, thank you. We did do it for a short time in I'm not remembering exactly when, but yeah, and the only reason we did it was successful, and it's just a matter of equipment availability, and it's one of those things where we just are struggling with. Furthermore, the routes, the overnight routes that go all the way to Boston, 66 and 67, through some of our recent construction constraints, well, some of those trips aren't even operating, let alone being able to have a sleeping car on them. And so a double dilemma. But long term, I think it's something we're quite interested in and know that there's demand for it.
So this is probably for both of you. We'll just kind of paraphrase from our online audience. Given sort of the history of procurements with manufacturers who have been slow, have failed to meet deadlines, have delivered cars with warranty issues, this is not Amtrak's fault. This is clearly, lies elsewhere, as we saw in the OIG report. But it keeps happening. What tools do you have to stop that from happening? If you don't have them, do you need our help getting them? If you do have them or are developing them, just can you share with us what you're going to do as we undertake this really historic long-distance fleet replacement? What are we going to do to hold folks to their contractual requirements? Actually, you have your...
Oh, will I be live?
You can talk if you're live.
I can start, Larry, if you want to finish. But so I do know that we, per the recent OIG report, we need to look at what those risks are and understanding what they are, what the lessons learned are, taking them and then applying them to our next procurement. So it's all, in my observations, we're running in parallel, kind of taking those observations and almost in real time from the manufacturers and then applying them to this new procurement so we can avoid some of those as we go through the long distance, as well as the aero as the fleet's delivered for that.
That's right. I think that's the main point is, ideally the aero procurement will be on a much better path than some of our recent experiences. And I think that is a beneficiary of, sort of the relearning and the institutional knowledge within the organization. And ideally, the long distance fleet benefits from that doubly. But it's also a very complex procurement. So our work's cut out for us, but